A week or so ago, I was driving down to Texas. It was a long drive, one that would take 2 days unless I drove non-stop throughout the night. However, I was eager to reach my destination, and I chose to tough it out for the sake of getting there sooner. The drive started out relatively normal. I drove for a couple of hours south, and I felt good. I had my music cranked and a cooler full of energy drinks in the passenger seat. When I saw the sign saying, "Now entering Tennessee," I thought I was making record time. I must have forgotten to watch the clock though, because the sun began to set. I was partially confused, mainly due to the fact that I left earlier in the day, but I disregarded it as the idle distractions I'd created for myself to pass the time faster being the cause. Something else odd I noticed was the open freeway. Normally, I would expect to see many vehicles all travelling to different places, but instead, I seemed to be the only one out and about. Still, I wasn't feeling tired, and I had already committed to driving straight through the night, even if things seemed strange. But as I drove on, I realised that the sun had set far too quickly, and with the lack of vehicles on the road, it looked like I was driving in a void. The blackened world around me was only illuminated by my high beams, but I could only see perhaps 15 feet ahead of me. There were a few novelties, like guardrails and mile markers, but if something were to appear in front of me, I'd likely hit it because of my lack of visibility. So I pulled over. My vehicle came to a subtle halt on the side of the freeway, and I turned on my emergency lights. Realistically, I knew it wasn't a fog. It was just dark. Darker than the world behind my eyelids. I suppose I wanted to see another car pass by before I concluded that something had gone wrong. But none came. I waited for more than 20 minutes and not one car or truck barreled down the freeway. I decided to roll my window down and allow some fresh air into my car. Plus, I was slightly panicking because I did have somewhere to be, and this was taking up precious time. Suddenly, the engine shut off. Even the accessory power had gone cold. I performed some percussive maintenance by smacking my hand against the dash as if it would magically fix everything, but it obviously didn't. Then I heard a quiet ticking sound. You know the sound your fingers make when you tap them against a table? It was like that, but instead of the soft, fleshy contact you get from the skin of your digits, it was more like the clicking of nails against plastic. My intuition told me it was coming from under the hood, and therefore I'd have to step outside. But just as I was about to open the door, I almost had a heart attack because hanging over the trim of the windowsill was a hand. I freaked out and flung myself into the passenger seat on top of my cooler. The hand was tapping its pale white fingers against the inner part of my door, and after my initial fear died down, I thought that it may have been someone looking to help me. Foolish, I know, but I did have my four-ways on. A part of me knew full well that another vehicle hadn't pulled up behind mine while I was distracted by the engine malfunction, but I still inquired. Hello, who's there? The fingers stopped moving and the hand slipped down slowly over the side of the door out of sight. I waited while trying to catch my breath before asking again. Hey, who's there? Why are you messing with me? No sound. Not even crickets responded to me. I turned my head to peer out of the rear window, and I couldn't see anything, which made me wonder more as to who was outside of my car. My ear was pressed against the passenger window, and just as I was about to slide back into the driver's seat, I heard the tapping a second time right next to my ear. I nearly got whiplash from the speed at which I turned my head to look out of the window. There wasn't anything there, in terms of a tapping hand. However, there were fingerprints left in the condensation on the outside of the glass. My heart raced and I crawled back into the driver's seat and tried to stupidly roll the window up, even though I quickly realised that was futile. Then I started to hear footsteps in the gravel on the side of the asphalt, but when I looked in my mirrors, I saw nothing. That was until my headlights came on without warning. They flashed brightly ahead of me and illuminated the figure of a human standing directly in the light. But I couldn't see who it was because they were missing their head. The headless torso held out its thumb as if it were hitchhiking. However, it only did so for a moment before beginning to approach my vehicle. I tried to start the engine, but for some reason my key wouldn't crank, and then I thought, if the headlights are on, then surely I should be able to at least roll the window up. It moved slowly, the body that is, towards me, with a shambling, unstable gait. Unfortunately for me, my window wouldn't go up. Even when fiddling with the key in the ignition, I started to panic and sweat began forming on the palms of my hands. By the time it was at the front corner of the driver's side, I decided I would get out and confront it. As I reached for the door handle and pulled, I found that it wouldn't open. I have one of those stupid pull-up locks that sink into the door, so I wasn't able to grip it and force it up. The electronic unlock didn't work either, so my only option was to climb out of the window. The problem was, it had already reached my side mirror. There was no way I would be able to crawl through the window without that thing grabbing me, so once again I slid into the passenger seat, with my feet poised to kick if it tried to worm its unnatural way inside. From there, I could see it was a masculine body that was exceedingly tall. It wore a grey sweatshirt laden with holes. It had scuffed pants with tread marks, denoting a tyre had crossed over them at ludicrous speed. If I had to guess, I'd say that they'd been run over. As it tried to reach its arm inside, I kicked it away. It didn't appear to have much more than primal instinct because it stumbled back and took some time to regain itself. Still, regardless of the fact that it was a brainless walking corpse, I was terrified. When it reached inside the second time, I scooted myself towards the driver's seat and forcibly jammed my foot against its chest, sending it falling to the ground. I used the opportunity to get out of the car via the open window and run around to the trunk. I couldn't open it without the key, which I had stupidly left inside, but at least I could get away. But as it rose to its feet, I felt an immense pressure in my head, as if someone was squeezing my brain. My vision became blurry and different parts of my body burned. Every time I tried to move one of my limbs, I couldn't, and the paralysis weaving its way throughout my body made me an easy target. The headless torso continued shuffling its disjointed feet in my direction with an outstretched hand, but the other was held low with its thumb out. Suddenly, my faculties snapped back into my control and I was able to avoid its mindless descent by stepping to the other side of my vehicle. I don't know what made me think the car would start if I tried again, but despite my former failures, I awkwardly jumped inside and turned the key. My eyes widened with joy when the engine turned over, followed by the familiar rumbling of the vehicle running. I threw the shifter into drive and slammed my foot on the gas without hesitation and sped off into the dark. I thought I was in the clear and my breathing slowly returned to normal. It was odd that some strange part of me thought that maybe it was just a ghost that was asking for help. But that was highly improbable, and now I know that wasn't the case. The freeway was still obscured by all the encompassing darkness, but I didn't care. I just kept driving. Then my heart skipped a beat because standing on the side of the road was the headless person. I drove by but couldn't see them in my rearview mirror due to the darkness. I took a breath and drove on without trying to think about it too much while taking a look at my clock to see what the time was. It read 00:00. Bloody great. Still maintaining a relatively high speed, my hands were firmly gripping the steering wheel and I kept thinking it was over, but I was wrong again. Like before, I saw the body standing adjacent to the freeway with an outstretched thumb. It started walking into the road as if it were trying to be hit. I avoided it and continued on, completely freaked out. I took a peek in my rearview mirror and I could have sworn it was sitting in my back seat, but as I quickly glanced over my shoulder, it was just an empty seat. My paranoia was somewhat satiated when I saw it again, but now it was holding something in the hand that didn't have its thumb out. As I drove by, I narrowed my eyes to see it closer. It was holding a smiling head. At this point, I was close to fainting from the fear. I just wanted this horror loop to end, but as that crossed my mind, I heard something heavy fall onto the roof of my car. I jumped to my seat, startled by the sound, and looked up. Obviously, I couldn't see anything, but I could hear movement, and I could sense the weight lurking above. Regrettably, during all the chaos, I had still forgotten to roll the window up, which I admit was entirely my fault, much to my dismay. I say that because the sound suddenly stopped, and I thought it was over once again. But when I looked to my left, I was met face to face with the severed head. The body was on the roof, holding the head in my open window. I yelled and it tossed the head inside and it latched onto my thigh, biting deeply into my muscle. It laughed maniacally and I nearly crashed, trying to deal with both the head and keeping my vehicle on the road. I yelled out in pain and began pounding my fist against the back of the head. Luckily, one of my attacks dislodged it from my leg. I grabbed onto it with my free hand before throwing it out of the window. All at once, the darkness lifted and I was able to see the head bouncing down the freeway in my mirror, followed by the body it belonged to sliding off my roof, only to tumble on the road. I was breathing so hard I thought I might lose consciousness, and my leg was bleeding pretty badly, but I dared not stop. I started to see other vehicles, and that's when I finally allowed myself to feel any sort of relief. The events I had experienced shocked my system, and I decided I would pull off at the nearest town and get a motel for the rest of the night. When I found one, the lady at the counter said, "Your face is so pale, are you okay?" I looked deeply into her eyes and said, "There was a man, or rather a body, on the freeway without a head. It terrorized me and nearly killed me." She stared at me for a moment before bursting into laughter. "Oh, you young people, you always have the craziest stories. Although, I do seem to remember someone else saying something about a body on the freeway once." My eyes lit up. What did they say? What happened to them? Well, nothing happened. We called the police, but they found no bodies, nor did they find any evidence of an accident. The person ended up leaving the next morning, and that was that. "Huh," I added softly. I got a room for the night and addressed my wound. It wasn't as bad as I originally thought. It must have been the lighting that made it look worse. I stayed until around early morning and then checked out with barely any sleep. Now, I'm telling you to avoid driving down any freeway if you're going to Texas. I mean, I can't say for sure what the catalyst is, but something to do with my specific trip caused me to experience this horrific anomaly, and I just want to warn everyone I can. Although the lady at the counter did say someone else experienced something similar. I just don't know, and it's better to be safe than sorry. What's even worse is that when I was about to get into my car to continue my drive south, I noticed a fresh handprint pressed firmly against the outside of my driver's window. I guess I'll be sticking to day driving from now on. I sit in silence. The fluorescent tube lights buzz above me. The sign outside shines brightly against the night sky. Equinox Oils. It's a small, desolate gas station out in the middle of nowhere, and I'm the poor soul tasked with maintaining the pumps and catering to our customers. It's a boring job. It used to be more bearable back when I had another person working with me, but the last guy quit 2 months ago. Good for him, I thought. I would quit too if I could, but alas, I can't. Just then, I'm awakened from my boredom-induced trance as a car rolls into the parking lot and parks next to mine. I watch as a pudgy man steps out and ambles towards the store. The bell chimes as he pulls the door open. I clear my throat, preparing to greet him, when suddenly he stops moving and turns his gaze upward. "Sir, is there a problem?" I ask, when rapidly the man is violently yanked up into the air by some dark, gangly arm. The door swings shut as I let out a whimper. What just happened? What should I do? I think to myself, eventually deciding that the best course of action would be to call 911. I slowly make my way past the walls of chips and soda and into the employees only room. There's a small desk, a calendar and a computer, but most importantly, a phone. I shakily punch 911 into the keypad and wait for a response. The phone rings once, twice, 3 times, when eventually I'm greeted by a calm female voice.
"Emergency services, what is your emergency?"
"Well," I stuttered. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, a man just got pulled into the sky." They would never believe me. I eventually settled on, "I've just witnessed a possible kidnapping."
"Okay, we'll send 2 officers right away."
I sighed a sigh of relief as I set the phone back down on the receiver. I shakily made my way back to the front of the store and gazed out the window. What had I just seen? Was it on the roof? Could it still be on the roof now? I thought. Then I made the worst decision of my life. I decided to find out. I grabbed a mop and slowly pushed the door open until the chime went off. A rumble sounded from above me. I stood petrified, waiting for something to happen. Then something happened. I watched as long, inky, black, skeletal fingers descended from the roof and slowly curled around the door frame. I bolted to the back of the store. I could hear the beast behind me break through the door and crash through the aisles behind me. I pushed open the employees-only door and locked it behind me. Moments later, I heard the thing slam into the door. I let out a sigh of relief. I was safe, at least for now. Then it slammed into the door again. The door buckled. I quickly threw myself against the door as it rammed the door again. I could hear the door splintering, and then the thing on the other side starts snarling. Then it stopped. I heard sirens outside the store wailing. Oh, thank goodness, I thought. 4 shots rang out. I cracked the door open a sliver, enough to see the thing outside. It was tall and dark with matted fur and long crooked limbs, and had the head of a deer. It was taking shot after shot without so much as flinching. The officers were dead from the moment they answered the call. I knew that, and they must have too. So I did the only thing I could think of. While the beast outside was distracted, I rushed outside to my car, turned the ignition and peeled off as fast as I could. I drove and never looked back. When I got into the nearest town, I rented a room at a motel, though I barely slept that night. In the morning, I went to Starbucks and checked my phone for the first time since starting my shift yesterday. 2 officers missing without a trace. Read a headline. I got a text from my boss reading, "Where are you? There are cops at my house asking for you." I spoke to them eventually though. They didn't take me seriously. But they had no reason to suspect me, and the whole event was chalked up to a bear attack. The only reason I'm typing all this up is because I'm now back at my apartment, and I'm seeing antlers outside my window. I live on the 3rd floor. If you enjoyed tonight's video, please gut punch that like button, and don't forget to turn on bell notifications. That way you can hear my rugged Australian accent read more scary stories. See you next time.